So welcome to episode 3 of Assassin's Creed Revelations. This is going to be something known as pointing. So I don't want to spend all day here, so I'll just quickly run down what it is. For those of you that don't like watching people going around collecting collectibles and just doing random sort of daily quests, in one of those terms, daily quests, if you don't like watching that, then by all means, no lease, this is not going to be for you. This is me going around the Galatta district, collecting all of the data fragments which we found and the treasures as well. I buy some treasure maps and get some treasures. I also get the viewpoints as well, and that's about it. So if you don't like that stuff, then by all means, I will see you in the next episode where we will resume our regular adventure. However, this is just going to be me going around the Galatta district, as you can see right now, collecting the bits and bobs. Obviously, you can see this is going to be post-commentary. I've already recorded this. I'm doing this over my voice dub over this. But what I'm going to be doing as well, if you're like me and you like all the information you can collect in the database, I'm going to be reading off each individual database entry. I'll show like a clip of it first, and then I'll read it off while I'm walking around in the world collecting all the stuff in a bit of like an audiobook format. I think that's about it though. Quickly run down why this is called pointing, for those of you that don't remember or don't know or have never heard. Pointing is a term I've given to me collecting stuff and doing this sort of thing because it started in Assassin's Creed 1 or 2 I think, where I wanted to have an episode where I just go around doing all the viewpoints, the collectibles and all that sort of stuff, and it sort of stemmed from viewpoints. I was going to call it viewpointing, but then I realised just drop the view and call it pointing, so it's like me pointing at all the collectibles, pointing them out. So that's why it's called pointing, and it's sort of a term that's sort of stuck with Assassin's Creed and other games as well, where I do sort of daily quest sort of stuff, and it's just a term that I use from now on. But anyway, that is that. I think it's time now to go on and talk about the database entries. We'll start with Byzantines. In 293 CE, the Roman Emperor Diocletian, having come to feel that his empire had grown too large and complex to be ruled by one man, appointed 3 others to rule as his equals, known as the Rule of 4. This infamous treachery stands as being one of all-time worst ideas in the history of governance. In just 3 decades, Constantine I, the most ambitious of the new emperors, eliminated his rivals and proclaimed himself the sole Caesar of the Roman Empire. Immediately after taking charge, Constantine made a second earth-shaking decision. He would have his kingdom's capital 1,000 miles east to the site of ancient Byzantium, a small city on the border between Europe and Asia founded by Doric Greeks almost a millennium earlier. Constantine set about rebuilding this ancient city to his strict specifications, with the aim of creating the world's first Christian empire. While construction was finished in 330 CE, the city he had transformed was rechristened Nova Roma Constantinopolina, New Rome City of Constantine. It was to be the centre of a glorious new empire founded on Constantine's particular militant form of Christianity, for he was a man who equated the cross with the sword, one a perfect invasion of the other. In Constantine's mind, his preferred faith should be spread by forceful example, not passive adoption. Lasting more than 1,000 years, the borders of this new Roman Empire, called the Byzantine Empire today, fluctuated wildly over his long life, in borders expanding and retracting like the tides of the Great Sea. But for all its preferable movements, its axis remained fixed on the great city Constantinople. Even as the empire changed hands between Greek, Latin and Macedonian dynasties, Constantinople's importance was constant. But the empire it held in place would not be. Beginning in 1261 with the exposition of the Latin Emperor Michael Palaeologus established what would be the last of the great Byzantine dynasties. For all Michel's efforts at rebuilding the 13th century Byzantine Empire possessed only a fraction of its former land and influence. And under the subsequent reign of Andronicus II, Palaeologus declined even further. By 1400, the emperor occupied only a small portion of France and a few islands in the Mediterranean. The astounding growth and expansion of the Ottoman Empire had swallowed up all Byzantine holdings on the Anatolian Peninsula and was now threatening to engulf them from the north as well. In 1397, Ottoman Sultan Bayezid I waged an unsuccessful attack on the city, which gave the Byzantine a minute sense of relief in the ensuing years. But it was soon clear that Ottoman juggernaut could not be stopped. In the first decades of the 15th century, Byzantine emperors begged leaders in Western Europe for aid, but ongoing wars and the complicated feelings held by the Catholic West about the Orthodox cousins led only to a series of half-hearted gestures and occasional alliances. At long last, in 1453, the invasion of so many Byzantine emperors had feared for nearly a century came to pass. Led by the Sultan Mehmet II, Mehmet the Conqueror, as he was later known, a massive Ottoman army marched to the walls of Constantinople and laid siege. Emperor Constantine XI fought the invaders bravely for almost 2 months, but succumbed in the end. His city was ruined and decrepit. His soldiers were brave but exhausted, and there was no point fighting. What he knew was inevitable. Still, Constantine gave it his all. On his final day, he attended mass with his generals, then returned to Balachnia Palace to await the final assault. When it came, the emperor stripped off his royal garments and dove into the melee with his men, exclaiming, "We are defeated, but I still live." He was never heard from or seen again. Jazzanaries. Both admired and feared by the populace, the Jazzanaries were the Sultan's elite soldiers, expertly trained warriors loyal only to their leader. Raised from early childhood through the Devashrine system, the practice of conscripting intellectually and physically exceptional Christian children for permanent positions in Ottoman military and government, the Jazzanaries were an unequivocal influential social class of their own. While they were not free in the standard sense, they nevertheless had an inordinate influence on imperial politics, and any man who failed to gain their favour would never become an effective ruler. As one historian of the era wrote, the Jazzanaries terrified the people of Istanbul. Above all, don't let any of your people get into quarrels with the Jazzanaries. The Porte functions advised foreign ambassadors, because we would be quite unable to do anything for you or for them. When bands of Jazzanaries entered a district, the shopkeepers immediately shut up shop. It was usually impossible to stop them ransacking a city after it had surrendered. By the end of Mehmet II's reign, the Jazzanaries had become a military and political force with unprecedented power, and would begin to influence the course of the empire's growth in ways no sultan had ever dreamed. Bankers. Due to the few tenets of Islamic law, specifically the injunction against charging interest for profit, modern banking as we know it today was not officially endorsed by Ottoman authority until the middle of the 19th century. In its place was a quasi-religious network of waqifs, moneylenders who were required to spend all of their interest earned on social and religious programs. Non-Muslim populations were exempt from these strictures, however, which led to the early formation of more formal banking operations, especially in Galatta, where enclaves of Greeks, Jews, and Armenians flourished. Doctors. Because of Constantinople's unique geographic position on the boundary between Europe and Asia, doctors in the Ottoman Empire were well versed in the traditions of Eastern and Western medicine, which meant, depending on your perspective, that they were either doubly educated or doubly confused. From the Greeks, the Ottoman had inherited the fondness for bloodletting and application of leeches to cure diseases, and from the Turks they retained a passion for cauterizing the wounds and convalescing in hot springs. Herbal folk medicines were also in widespread use. One Ottoman medical tome names over 600 different herbs with perpetuant medical properties. Despite the nascent state of medicine at the time, the Ottoman Empire was notable for the fact that its hospitals charged no fees. Citizens with money, however, were still more likely to hire private physicians. Some things never change, do they? Bookshop. During the Haynes-Gutenberg's upgrade of the centuries-old movable type press in the middle of the 15th century stands as one of the most significant technological advances ever known. For the first time in human history, the production and dissemination of books of all kinds in all languages no longer required a skilled copyist and many patient months of work. Now a book could be set in a few weeks and copied innumerable times in a very short period. As a result, books got cheaper and were readily available to the newly emerging middle class. Ottomans. The Battle of Perilous, fought just 50 kilometres to the east of Constantinople in 1301, marks the first recorded mention of the Ottomans in world history. Led by a man called Osman, his modest army of Turks won a stunning victory over the Byzantines' opponents, routing them from their battlefield and driving them north to the edge of the Sea of Marmara. The defeat shocked the complacent Byzantines, who had already been struggling for decades to maintain a grip on the region. Over the next 150 years, the strength of the size of the Ottoman Empire grew practically unhindered. Winning victory after victory, the Ottoman sultans slowly but surely engulfed regions once controlled by the mighty Byzantine Empire. First in Anatolia, the new modern Turkey, then in France, present-day Hungary, Greece, Macedonia, Albania, etc. Over time, the Ottomans' increasing presence in Eastern Europe began to worry the West, and most especially irked the Vatican, whose hatred of the Eastern Orthodox Church now seemed a more quarrel over semantics in light of the encroaching Islamic Empire. But when push came to shove, and even the Pope could not be bothered to send aid to the ailing Byzantine Empire, whose empire by the middle of the 15th century contained only the capital, Constantinople, and its surrounding villages. Then at last, in 1453, after 54 days of fighting, Constantinople fell to the Ottomans too, led by their Sultan, 21-year-old Mehmet II. The Janissaries poured through the breach in the walls into the city. Upon entering the city centre, the victorious Sultan headed straight for renowned Hagia Sophia. Reaching the ancient cathedral, he fell to the ground and sprinkled some raw earth over his turban as a sign of respect. Eager to relocate the capital to the shores of the Bosporus, Mehmet I's order of business was to rebuild Constantinople, now rendered as Constantinia in Turkish and collectively called Istanbul by many of its residents, as a modern city of a cosmopolitan empire. In the decade after conquest, he was careful to preserve what he could of the old Byzantine capital, while imbuing everything with a modern Ottoman meaning. In this, Sultan Mehmet must be considered a success, or in little more than a few decades the population exploded from a paltry 40,000 citizens to well over 100,000 Muslims, Christians, Jews and Roman. People flocked in the city from east and west, drawn to the capitals bursting with commercial life in the heat of an empire that valued religious and cultural diversity not only by tradition but by right of law. Blacksmiths. Every Renaissance community needed a blacksmith. Swords, locks, pans, knife, nails, and armour were all made from metal, and all needed to be shaped. In addition, architectural ironwork flourished during the Renaissance as blacksmiths began to apply their practical craft towards making art. Heralds. Proclamations, local laws, news, market days, and advertisements were all called out by heralds. Since many people in the 16th century could not read, in Ottoman Constantinople heralds were joined by their cousins, the muezzin, the criers who stand atop minarets and perform the daily calls to prayer. Greek fire. For centuries, the Byzantine Empire used Greek fire during naval battles. This gave them a great technological advantage and was responsible for many key victories, such as the salvation of Constantinople in 1203 from 2 Arab sieges. Incendiary weapons were used in warfare for centuries before the invention of Greek fire, but what set the Byzantine Greek fire apart was its unique formula, which would continue burning even on water, and the use of pressurized siphons to project the liquid onto the enemy ships. Some consider Greek fire the predecessor of modern napalm. The ingredients, the processes of manufacturing and the precise deployment of Greek fire were extremely well-guarded military secrets. Knowledge and fabrication of the substance was highly divided, and while operators and technologians aware of the secrets of all one component, ensuring that no enemy would gain knowledge of the formula in its entirety. For instance, some Bulgarians captured 36 Greek fire siphons in the early 9th century, but were unable to make use of them. Thieves. Following the example of legitimate craftsmen like miners, stonecutters, masons, and hangmen, many thieves in the Ottoman Empire were members of organised guilds, most of which were well known to the police on account of the frequent bribes and tributes the thieves paid to keep the authorities off their backs. The thieves were also mindful to target foreigners as often as possible as not to set up locals, which proved quite easy in cosmopolitan Constantinople. It must also be noted that the line between crook and cop was very porous in these days, as many of the police chosen to keep watch on the thieves were themselves former members of the licentious classes. Yusuf Tazim. Abstergo has some data on this guy, gathered a few years back, but there is not a lot about him in standard history books, which I'm sure he'd be happy to know. Yusuf Tazim was a Turk born in Bursa around 1467, but was raised in Constantinople after the age of 8 by his mother. His father was an assassin, and presumably that's how Yusuf became one too. But there's no mention of what happened to Papa Tazim. Was he killed? Did he desert his family? Your guess is as good as mine. By the time he was 17, Yusuf was well known around the city as a rabble-rouser and a petty thief, but the chance meeting with the legendary Vivulika Ishak Pasha changed all that. Ishak and the assassin, too, operated in the sublime porte right under Byzantine II's nose. It was Ishak who had defeated Vlad Tepes and later brokered the tentative truce between Ottomans and assassins. By the late 1480s, he was busy recruiting open-minded citizens of the empire to his order's cause. Yusuf was taken with Isaac's charisma and easy manner of leading, and so joined the assassins just before his 20th birthday. From there, Yusuf's rise was swift and assured, and by 1500 CE, he was made quite a name for himself. In 1502, Yusuf met with a contingent of Venetian assassins in Greece in a joint effort to slay the Ottoman-Venetian War to a peaceful end. These efforts appear to have paid off, for in 1503 the fighting stopped, ushering in a brief era of peace on the Ottoman Empire's western border. Prince Suleiman. Everyone in the world knew this guy's name in the 16th century. Suleiman the Magnificent, they called him in the West, the length of Sultan of Osman's ever-expanding empire. His fellow Turks were also generous with their praise, though far more practical, calling him Suleiman Kanuni, or the Lawgiver. The man responsible for improving the emperor's bureaucratic engine, making it run like a well-oiled machine. No small feat for an empire as large as his. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Ahead of our present concerns, when Ezio met Suleiman, he was still a young man with only the faintest hope of ever becoming sultan, since his father, Selim, was dead last in the Ottoman hierarchy. So, as befitting a young man of his status and stature, Suleiman threw himself into study with little thought of ever becoming sultan himself. He was educated at the university in Istanbul and received private tutoring in Topkapi Palace. Little else is known about his early years, except that he was a kind and thoughtful man, and he had a servant named Ibrahim, whom he considered his best friend. By the time Suleiman was 17, however, Bayezid had recognised his grandson's talent and intelligence and installed him as the governor of a large region north of the Black Sea. Over the next few years, Suleiman would hold a number of similar positions until 1520, when an unexpected tragedy robbed his father of the Sultanate. Suleiman, aged 26, took the throne, a position he would hold for almost 50 years. No pacifist, Suleiman would expand the Ottoman Empire's lands to his furthest points, and by the end of his rule, the lands under the Commune stretched from Algeria to the Persian Gulf, and from Austria down to Egypt. But for all his expansionist desires, he was a tolerant man too, and realised that the only way to keep an empire as large as his together was to honour the cultures, traditions and religions of those living under his auspices. Altair Ibn La Ahad. If one man was responsible for changing the face of the modern assassins forever, it was this guy. Altair Ibn La Ahad, born in the Holy Land in 1165, his parents he hardly knew, into an order he did not choose. Altair nevertheless proved himself a devoted pupil and capable fighter before he was out of his teens. In 1189, just as the Third Crusades were gathering steam, Altair stunned even his attentive mentor Al-Mualim by almost single-handedly routing a wave of Crusader soldiers from the steps of Masyaf Castle. From that day forward, Altair's name was known to all assassins. Over the next 2 years, his reputation as a stubborn but deadly fighter eclipsed every minor detail of his mysterious life. Loved by few, but admired by all, his impeccable talents were the source of both his incredible successes and his overbearing ignorance. But this was only half the story. Since youth, Altair had shown signs of possessing a rare sixth sense that allowed him to unprecedented access to the emotions and intentions of his opponents and allies. Dubbed Eagle Vision by his fellow assassins, Altair honed and perfected this sense in secret, always wondering if this curious ability that set him apart from the West would prove a liability. Thanks to the memories stored in Ezio's 5 Masyaf keys, we can now get a good glimpse at the man himself, instead of settling for a vague glimpse through the Templars' frankly primitive Animus 1.28 avatar protection system. Subject 16. Hello, I'm Clay Kazmarek, and I'm a number. Subject 16. Yes, we're all reducible in the end. Right, 17? Just numbers. Ones and zeros. I proved that. The day before I offed myself, I created this little artificial intelligent construction. Talking to you now, using the animus and its incredible simulation capabilities, I copied myself. Snapped that copy in 24 pieces and scattered them around into these databanks. You found them, and you pieced me back together. Not bad, eh? Teamwork. Word on the street, of course, is that Clay, the real Clay, that assassin Lucy's teammate, he isn't alive anymore. He slit his wrists in a head, if I heard right. Damn shame. I never got to see that his myself, but I can imagine my head was, pardon me, his head, was swimming with images of the last moments for weeks, like he was rehearsing it, planning just how he would do it. I hear he even got around to finger painting on the walls of his cell before checking out. Is that right? Mad bastard. I miss him, I really do. Sorry, this is getting confusing. The real Clay is gone, and I have taken his place. Good enough, right? Good enough to still call me cousin, right, Desmond? Very distant cousins, you and me, because somewhere back along our extensive family chain, we both have Ezio to thank for the gift of life. Both of us are related to him, and both of us have had a nice little jaunts through the memories. Although I had access to far fewer memories than you did. Figure that one out, I guess that's why you're so special. You're the convergence of several amazing bloodlines. But not me, no. I was just a promising lead, a stepping stone to get to you. Oh well, I played my part. What more can a man say? Very little, it turns out. The Great Chain. Built sometime around 1000 CE, the Great Chain was an ingenious, if slightly mad, defensive measure, anchored to 2 large towers and strung across the mouth of the Golden Horn. The chain's primary purpose was to prevent enemy ships from sailing up the waterway and attacking the sensitive and poorly defended ports of Constantinople's interior. As low-tech as this sounds, the chain performed admirably on more than a few occasions for more than 400 years, and in 1453 it so vexed the Sultan Mehmed II that he was forced to improvise an ever-stranger plan to circumvent the Byzantines' defences. He pulled his warships over the hills of the Galatta and slid them on greased tracks into the Golden Horn, far upriver from the chain. It just goes to show that crazy is often the only way to beat crazy. Galatta Tower. Built by Genoese settlers in 1348 as an expansion of their colony on the north shore of the city, Galatta Tower was the key component to a larger defensive structure, most of which has been dismantled by the time of the Ottomans. In the 17th century, the tower is purported to have served as a launch point for one of the earliest sustained unpowered attempts at human flight. According to reports from a travelling historian, a man named Hossein Hamit Shelebi strapped himself to a homemade glider on one fine day in 1632 and threw himself off the tower's cornice. According to this one, and the only eyewitness, Herefen's flights took him over Galatta and across the Bosporus waterway, where he landed safely on the shores of the Asian continent. Awed by his apparent supernatural abilities, the Sultan Mehmed paid Husufun a fat bag of gold coins, then banished him to Algeria, where he died some years later. Later in the 18th century, the Ottomans began using the tower to spot fires in and around the city, but in the late 20th century, the only fires of a concern of visitors of Galatta Tower were the burning up the floor of the nightclub built at the tower's apex. That's right, dinner and dancing for a modest price. High above the world, a far cry from the rather stupid emperors of the Middle Ages, no? The Golden Horn. The Golden Horn, or Halich, meaning waterway, is a estuary flowing into the Bosporus Strait that bisects Constantinople into a northern and southern halves. Because of its breadth and depth, the Golden Horn has served as a natural harbour since the days of ancient Byzantium. In 1502, after the cessation of violence between Ottomans and Venetians, Sultan Behezid II invited the famous Florentine Leonardo da Vinci to submit a design for a bridge that would span a 250-metre wide section of the Golden Horn. Upon seeing Leonardo's designs, however, the Sultan felt the project was too ambitious and scrapped the idea. 4 years later, Byzantium extended the same invitation to a young artist named Michelangelo, but Michelangelo, being an avowed rival of da Vinci's, refused the Sultan's invitation outright, evidently increased the Leonardo had been asked first. Constantinople. Founded in 658 BCE on First Hill, Byzantium began life as a modest walled-in city-state populated by Doric Greeks. Its founder was Bias, a soldier rumoured to have been the son of Poseidon and the nymph Kerosa. A devout man, Beza, had chosen the site of this new city based on a promising prophecy uttered by an oracle of Apollo at Delphi. From its earliest days, Byzantium was an isolated colony, a so-called island of Hellenistic civilization in a sea of barbarian tribes. Although its popular reputation as a raucous port town full of drunk merchants and sots typically outshined its credentials as a focus of culture. As the playwright Menander wrote in his new lost play, The Flute Girl, Byzantium makes all of her merchants drunkards. The whole night through they were drinking, and methinks 'twas very strong wine too. At any rate, I woke with a head for 4. In later centuries, as Greek civilization dwindled and receded, Byzantium's inhabitants diversified, and its rulers came and went in a rotating lineup of hopeful shepherds. Spartans, Macedonians, Athenians, and Romans all took their turn lording over the small city of First Hill. Then, in 324 CE, the Roman Emperor Constantine, inspired by a vision from God, he claimed, moved the capital of the Roman Empire to Byzantium, and once settled, set about rebuilding it to a strict specification, aiding grandeur and perchance befitting a Roman emperor. When construction was finished in 330 CE, he had the city rechristened Nova Roma Constantinopolia, New Rome, City of Constantine. Native-born city dwellers continued to call the city Byzantium for many generations, but gradually its colonial name, Constantinopolis, caught on, as did New Rome, since the men who ruled the city still thought of themselves as Romans living in the Eastern Roman Empire. The moniker Byzantium Empire is a more contemporary term that gained popularity sometime after the Ottoman conquest of the city. For over 800 years, Constantinople served as the capital of the transformed Roman Empire, keeping alive a commonwealth that had all been withered into the west until the weight of barbarian attacks and economic hardship through the Middle Ages. Constantinople burned brightly compared to the darkness that engulfed the rest of Europe. Though it too suffered its share of turmoil. In 1204, the city was captured by a Latin army. Shortly after, Pope Innocent III blessed the Vatican's fourth and final Christian crusade. But the Latins' brief tenure led to an influx of Venetian and Genoese merchants who took up residence in the south and north side of the Golden Horn, respectively. In 1261, Michel Pelagiogos, Greek heir to the Byzantine throne, marched on Constantinople and won a decisive victory. But the city he had recaptured was faltering, and the emperor had now possessed a more fraction of its former land and influence. This began the 200-year decline of a once great city, and through Constantinople continued to flourish as a cultural centre, thanks to its large part through a healthy system of arts patronage from wealthy residents. The city's population rapidly dwindled. By 1397, it was clear the city's days of the Byzantine capital were numbered. To the north, east and south, the Ottoman Empire was expanding and gaining strength, squeezing the city like a ripe grape. The Byzantine emperors of this era pleaded with the leaders in Western Europe for aid, but ongoing wars from the complicated feelings held by the Catholics West concerned their Orthodox cousins led only to the series of half-hearted gestures and weak alliances. At long last, in 1453, the invasion so many Byzantines had feared for nearly a century came to pass. Led by the Sultan Mehmed II, Mehmed the Conqueror as he was later known, a massive Ottoman army marched into the walls of Constantinople and laid siege. From that day forward, the Ottomans, Turks, ruled the city, and they made it their first priority was to restore the city to its former glory. With the Sultans adopting a tolerant position with respect to religion, the city became more attractive to all kinds of creeds, and for over the next 100 years its population increased tenfold, from 40,000 to 400,000. Constantinople, now called Istanbul by a large number of its residents, was back on the map and destined for greatness once again. Cappadocia, a rocky region in Anatolia, now the Nevşehir province of central Turkey. Cappadocia is an area best known for its sparse and rugged terrain and stunning rock formations. Because of this unique geography, Cappadocia has often existed apart from the empires that grew and flourished outside its borders. Alexander the Great, for instance, was able to subdue the region fully during these lengthy military campaigns and was forced to settle for a nominally autonomous kingdom led by its own king, existed inside the boundaries of his own empire. Arid and open compared to Constantinople's lush density, Cappadocia is best known to outsiders for its 200 underground cities and villages, a few of which once housed and sheltered populations of over 10,000 people between the years 600 and 1400 BCE. Literally carved into the soft rock that prevalent throughout the region, these cities were fully functional colonies comprised of hundreds of narrow tunnels and caverns connecting dozens upon dozens of rooms, including living quarters, chapels, granaries, kitchens, wine and oil presses, Venetian shafts and stables. The largest of these cities, Derinku, was built to a depth of 85 metres and consisted of 11 interlocking levels with more than 50 ventilation shafts. Beginning in the 13th century, when the Byzantine Empire was crumbling and the emperors could no longer protect their subjects living on the entire shrinking borders of their kingdom, wayward Christians took to living in the hidden cities for extended periods to stay hidden from the encroaching Muslim populations. It is unclear why these cities were eventually abandoned, but it is likely that small populations occupied them in such capacity up until very recently, when the majority of the cities still intact were turned into tourist attractions. Masyaf. Hidden away in the Ortans Valley in what is now Syria, Masyaf was the headquarters of the Assassin Brotherhood in the Levant. Its proximity to Jerusalem, Accra and Damascus made it the natural centre of assassin influence in the region. By the Third Crusade, Masyaf had become the political, cultural and geographic centre of the assassins, a training ground, an impenetrable fortress, a sanctuary, a vast library and a base of operations for the Brotherhood. Masyaf was all of these things, yet the public's perception of the citadel was far less complete, for in those days the citadel and its inhabitants were kept isolated from the larger populace. Life within the walls of Masyaf was Spartan and strict, consisting of many regimented rituals and challenges, and it was an exclusive group of assassins, mostly men, were born into the order, now not recruited, and trained from an early age to obey their mentor and adhere to the creed. In 1191, the Crusade commander Robert de Sable led siege to the city and the castle. The assassins withstood the assault, but briefly succumbed to by another enemy later the same year, when Grandmaster Al-Mualim betrayed the Brotherhood and briefly seized control of Masyaf during the powerful Appalachian artifact. His defeat at the hands of Altair Ibn La Ahad marked the turning point of assassin ideology. In later years, the assassins gradually abandoned many of the unnecessary rituals enforced by Al-Mualim. Over time, Altair, now a mentor himself, adapting to transform Masyaf into a place of learning and healing, opening the citadel's doors to recruits from around the world, and for a time he succeeded exponentially well. Oh my god, we're done. Oh, I've already got about a minute left. God, my voice, it's dead. I don't think I can do it anymore. And this video is like 33 minutes long. Hopefully that's okay. As in the video I recorded to get the short clips that you see. Hopefully it'll be alright. It should be. We'll find out. But my voice is now gone. How unfortunate. Right, so okay, so 33 minutes 57. Oh, so I've got 57 minutes left, seconds. So yeah, that was pointing. We'll do this probably every Sunday, depending on if we've got anything to do. Probably will be one next week. But I think we'll be alright. Like, we'll just read through more of the database entries as we go along. But I'm now going to go and rest my voice because it is nearly gone. I don't think there's much else to say. Here we were pointing in Galatta because we were doing the district of Galatta district, the European side of the Constantinople. Some interesting things. That Subject 16 one was quite cool. I always forget that they were distant cousins. But that's pretty cool. Anyway, that's that done, I think. I think I should say goodbye now then. So I don't know whereabouts we are in the video, but I think it's time to say we shall fall into an adventure. See you next time.